We are on
All
it.
right, just wanted to. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Um, Today is May 16th, 2026, and I'm pleased to facilitate this discussion about transgender and homeless issues. Um, I guess we will begin with transgender issues. And did we still agree that we're going to speak about women competing in, or trans women competing in women's sports?
Um,
Or did we decide to move on to something else?
I think Joden had an opening statement, which I'm honestly curious to hear if you still want to give it, and if you don't, that's totally fine too.
I mean, I can mostly just shortcut it. I kind of
Cool.
wrote out a whole thing, but and it was like it's like a 5 minute read. But instead of like absorbing all of the 5 minutes, I basically just want to make the delineation between the different types of trans people that there are. There are the trans people who I believe are very valid in how they function and operate and feel in this world, where for the most part, they don't really want to bring attention to themselves. They don't want to be a part of spaces and areas where they know that they shouldn't be. They understand that they are biologically a male or they are biologically a female, but they identify as the opposite sex. Therefore, they take up the opposite gender and they do their best to represent that. There are areas that they understand, hey, look, in sports, I'm not going to try to go in there because that's just not my place. They don't try to go into like locker rooms and do all of this stuff. Maybe there's like the concept of passing. If they can enter into a women's space and they're basically invisible to their trans identity, then I think for the most part nobody really has any issue with that. If they look like a woman and they pass, I don't think anybody's really gonna notice or care if they go into the women's restroom and they go to the bathroom. That's kind of like a non-issue, in that kind of a sense. I think that they also understand that when it is appropriate, they will announce that they are trans. So like if there's like a dating situation and there's some flirting going on or something like that, they understand to say, hey, look, I see that you're interested in me. I'm interested in you too, but I'm trans. So, if you're okay with that, then we can continue. If not, we can go our separate ways and, mind our own business. And then you have the alternate, which is the trans activist types, which is the ones that I think are the ones who we really generally have a problem with. They are the types who will insert themselves into situations where they are clearly identifiable. They are inserting themselves into the women's restrooms. They'll walk in, and oftentimes they're dressed in very. They do not appear to be very convincing women, and they will often make demands of other people in order to push themselves into those environments. And that can be from sports and locker rooms and even just like clubs. If there's like hey, if there's like a women's club, well, they want to go in the women's club because they view themselves as women. And there's kind of like they're the ones who kind of created the, which I think is actually very interesting. They created the term or the saying, trans women are women. And what they actually mean by that is that if the thing that's odd about it is that they're using the identifier trans, and then they're removing it so that when people think about trans women are women, they're actually supposed to think women are women and that they are included in it. And through that kind of a logic, it enables them to enter into all of these other spaces. And that's where I think that there's a lot of problems that kind of arise. So I want to make that delineation between the two types of trans people. There's the regular trans people who really understand exactly what I'm saying and they don't take any issue with what I'm saying. They're fine. I don't think anybody for the most part has any real problem with them. They stay away from the children. They're not trying to intrude. They're not doing any of this stuff. But the trans activists, they are everywhere and they demand that you think that you respond and you react exactly in ways that they understand. So that's all I have for my opening statement.
Thank you, Jordan.
I have opinions, but if anybody else wants to go, yeah, go ahead, Will.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I agree with a lot of what Joden said. Of course, we're on the same side of the aisle, but, my biggest problem is not with trans people. A lot of people who are trans, or maybe they are trans activists, claim that people don't want trans people to exist. They're very extreme in their language when those extremes really don't apply. Um, I'm a teacher. I have taught trans students. I have never intentionally been rude to a trans student, even though they don't necessarily look the gender that they would like to be, you know. But this whole thing about compelling people to agree with them or to identify them as something they don't even look like is troubling to me.
Um, so I I want to say just I appreciate everybody being here and having this discussion. It's really cool that we're doing this, and thanks to Jeremy for putting it together, and to Joe for moderating, and of course to Joden, Willow, and Neil for participating. I actually do agree that activism can go too far, not just with trans issues, but with many issues on the left, the right, and I actually think that people who reflectively think we should be centrist, like the centrists. So let's just meet halfway. It's to me a lot of times I think they're splitting the baby, and each person gets half the baby, and it's like, well, no, that's actually not always the good solution, right? The moral of that story was that no, you can't always just divide everything. Um, so not to say centrists are always wrong, but centrism can also be too extreme. Like let's just agree because is not always the way to go. Um, as far as activism goes, I live in San Francisco, which is kind of the one of the national epicenters, if not the national epicenter, for LGBTQ issues, trans issues for people that don't see them as the same thing, and homeless issues, which are the two topics here. And I think there is a quote from Douglas Adams, the science fiction writer, um, or comedy writer, depending on how you see him, who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He says, anything that is in the world when you're born is normal and ordinary. Anything invented between when you're 15 and 35 is new and exciting. Anything invented after you're 35 is against the natural order of things. And I'm not talking about people in this group necessarily. Or let me just say, I'm not talking about people in this group, because we are people who are willing to debate these topics and talk about them, and I think are willing to change our minds. But I think a lot of the resistance to trans people is the unfamiliarity of it. Younger people are more accepting because they're more familiar with it. Like you said, you have trans students, and I turned 60 this year, so a lot of the trans stuff is a big adjustment for me.
Mhm.
But living in San Francisco, I know I have used bathrooms with trans people. I know my wife has. I don't have a daughter. The question is it was raised about, would you feel safe for your 9-year old daughter to be in a restroom with trans people? I don't have a daughter, but I know my wife, my nieces, my mom before she passed away, etc., all used restrooms with trans people, and it was fine, right? So, and I also think there's a lot of activism in San Francisco. The what I've found from personal experience with trans people is if you if you meet them, I know I talked about not meeting people halfway as always being the solution. So now I'm going to contradict myself perhaps, but if you agree to use their preferred pronoun and and their preferred name, and generally just treat them as the gender with which they present themselves, they're fine. And I have non-binary workers, and I had one switch to non-binary while we were working together, and I was about to refer to her as a her, but them. Um, I had a hard time. I would forget all the time, and she would gently remind me, and I'd be like, "I'm sorry." Said to her, I'm like, I'm in my late 50s. It's an adjustment for me,
Mhm.
and she was perfectly happy to just take the effort that I was giving, and I think. Yes, I'm sure there are activists who are an exception. I don't run into them, even though I live in activism central. Um, and I have a lot of coworkers who are openly non-binary, and a few who I think are trans, but I don't necessarily know. Um, and I don't have this problem with the activism. If What I would say to Willow and Sis is, if someone insists that you use their preferred pronouns, I think it's reasonable for you to say, I don't like being called sis in
Right.
return.
And I don't like being called sis
Yeah,
because I don't think it's a necessary
yeah.
addition to what I am. And I don't think that I need to be differentiated from women. I don't think I
It's a redundant label
I
that
think
they're
I
using.
but the
and
problem
I think.
comes with
Go
the
ahead. Sorry.
insistence on using cis. It bothers me a good bit because the same people who insist that I should not be offended, that I should accept that addition to what I am, that it is the true definition, and that they have every right to use it, are the same ones who insist that I not be allowed to recognize what I know as absolute truth and be honest about it.
Well, they're aiming to other you. They're
Yes.
trying to
It
put you in a box so that you
absolutely.
are
Oh,
othered alongside them, because if they can other you, then that justifies their label. That
well, the
justifies
truth
them
is, and
being a they them.
I have done a whole lot of looking into cis, the word, the prefix, because of the strong protestations that it means nothing. And I know that's not true. I mean, it is used all the time in activism, in in ways of delineate, like you said, otherizing, because
Yeah.
there are slogans of "down with the system," and the revolutionary
It's part
fist
of the
against the
ideology.
system. And
Yeah.
so it is presenting people who are like me, who have done nothing to be labeled oppressors. It's putting them into an oppressor category.
Yeah, it's part of their ideology. And they need to create a system, like it's part of the gender ideology. So if they can break down all of the gender and all of that stuff, and it's actually kind of strange because there's the social, there's the gender is a social construct concept that the non-binary people use. But that would actually kind of go against what the trans ideology purports, because the trans people believe that they were born with in effect a different brain. So it actually, the like trans people believe it to more be a biological issue, and the non-binaries claim that gender is a social construct, which would pit trans and non-binaries against each other. But I
Uh,
really don't think that a whole lot of people have quite realized that contradiction yet. So
Well, that's because they have created the oppressor class with the whole cis identity that they've
yeah.
foist upon people against their beliefs and against their wishes.
Well, I think I'll try to be quiet so we can have others speak. But I think it's basically what I think is kind of happening is you have trans and mostly trans activists, and you have the which are they are feeling attacked and they're feeling oppressed, and they feel as though they need to have support and to grow in this movement and all of this stuff. And alongside them are the non-binaries, and so they're kind of using each other as one in order to advance their, like, both of their agendas. And both of their agendas, what they did is they went from they used the LGB kind of struggle, and they attached, so the trans attached themselves to the LGB struggle, and they said, hey, these guys were successful, so we're going to jump on the bandwagon for that and pull ourselves up. And then the non-binaries grabbed the trans people's legs and said, hey, we're coming with you. And neither of them really kind of fought against each other, even though they are maybe yet to understand that they are in conflict with each other in how they even view the world. So that's what I want to say for that.
There may be a, sorry, Neil, you haven't spoken yet.
Yeah,
Go
he's
ahead.
got to get in.
No, it's okay. So I'd like to say that starting out, radicals are a pain in the butt, and I don't care what side they're on, but sometimes they bring about good change. Their means and methods leave a lot to be desired most often. And certainly not everybody that's not in the LGBTQ community is to blame for what's happened to these people. But understand, it's been a war for them to get from people who had to hide in closets or get put in prison or worse, killed, to get to where they are today, where people will just accept that there's people out there like them. You know, when I was a kid, I had a friend, and I was friends with him, all his brothers, and he was just different. I didn't understand how different, but I understood he was different. When I joined the Marine Corps when I was in my 20s, he had joined the Navy and got stationed at Camp Lejeune, and he ended up moving in with us. And you know, to me, when it came to sexuality, I understood gay, I understood straight, and then somebody threw in the bisexual thing, and that just kind of really sent me for a loop. It took me a while to understand it, but I would watch Chris, because that was his name, and man, he was always going shopping with my wife to pick out clothes for her. And like if she had a meeting or something she was going to, he would go in and pick out her clothes for her. And I was cool with it because I didn't want to go clothes shopping. And I realized a few things that he was so different that he took weight off me. The only time I had an issue was in the kitchen. My wife and he would keep moving things around so the kitchen would be arranged the way they wanted it. And I don't care where stuff is in the kitchen. I just want to be able to get to it when I want it. So Chris, I'm trying to track him down, but he's off the radar because his family disowned him. He may have gone transgender. I'm not sure. I told my wife that I thought he was gay, and she said, "Why would you say that?" I said, "Because he's probably gay." And so when we start talking about this, I want to make some things clear from where I sit. This idea that there's only male and female makes sense until you give it more thought. What you should be saying is primarily, because physically you have met people in your life that in their bodies contain sex organs from both sexes, and they may not even be aware of it, right? There are kids that are born that have sex organs from both sexes, and it has to be medically remedied. And so the parents have to take the advice and decide what path they're going to go on. Then you have chemically, you have women that lived their whole lives as women would go to the Olympics and get tested and find out that chemically they're too male to be competing against women. And for a long time, they were prevented. I knew a professional boxer who's in the Boxing Hall of Fame. I've been in the ring with that person, Jackie Tonawanda. And Jackie was a woman who was fighting in the 1970s, early 1980s. And she famously knocked out a professional fighter in Madison Square Gardens in an undercard fight. But the thing is, she was a female and she was a wrecking machine. 1988, I fought to the Camp Lejeune Heavyweight Championship. And I had gotten in the ring with her when she first came. And to all the fighters, myself included, it was kind of funny that a woman thought she could box. And these jack wagons talked me into going in the ring with her, and I went in, and then they told her I was going to teach her what it's like to have to step into a man's world. I don't remember much from the fight, but I know they pulled her off me, and based on how much I heard after, I recognized she wrecked me. And I was a good inside fighter. So and my reason for bringing her up is she probably chemically, her body chemistry was primarily more male. So, and then you have the people that are psychologically drawn to something or another. I can't imagine wanting to look like a beautiful woman. I don't know what kind of dress that would take, but I'd probably live a long life alone. But some people are out there and they're driven to it. And I don't know why we can't just leave people alone. And maybe that's all I have on that, but we can talk about sports and we can talk about bathroom, and we definitely, I think, need to talk about rape with regard to transgender versus the heterosexual crowd. I think.
I mean, I also recognize that about 1.7% of people have some sort of genetic thing that makes them not XX or XY, but most of those do not have ambiguous bodies. They look like one or the other. And I don't doubt that this woman that you fought probably had something like, I don't know, Klinefelter syndrome or something that has two X's and a
High
Y.
testosterone.
Yeah. And I've never denied those people exist, but I don't think that using that exception again should be the rule for understanding all of male and female existence. So,
Yeah,
No, obviously we're talking about a group of people that are a very small percentage of the
right.
population.
they're an anomaly.
Right,
And we
but
don't
we
make
don't
rules
we
based
don't
off
need
of the
to treat them
anomalies.
differently. I mean,
No,
if
you should treat
someone
them
wants to dress like
like
a woman, I'm not losing any sleep
you
based
should
on the
dress. I mean, I'm
relationship.
sorry.
Yeah,
You
based on
should treat them
Go ahead.
with absolute respect, just like you treat every human being who is respectable. I have no problem with treating people with respect. And I'm not, like I said, I have had trans students. I have never told them they shouldn't be wearing what they're wearing. I try to just use their first names because I personally have a problem morally with saying something I know is not true in my heart. Yeah.
Well, one of the issues that I can understand from your perspective is that currently right now there's kind of an issue where there are legitimate, I think there's, or for legitimate enough reasons, there's trans people, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a trans ideology and what is it called? It's like a movement that's kind of socially enforced, that's kind of a social contagion. It's like
Hmm.
there's a trans social contagion when you start seeing a lot of these kids in schools and they're running around and they're getting confused, and they get confused because what I think is happening is that they're going through one of the toughest times of their life, which is puberty. Puberty is a very, very difficult thing, and a lot of times what can happen, you can look at, like, I was wondering whatever happened to the tomboy. Where are tomboys? I wonder how many tomboys exist in your school. Tomboys often were, here's a female who is they kind of tend to have more masculine-ish um, interests. They get along with the males more. They relate to them more, and they also can feel uncomfortable with their bodies. But as they go through puberty and they age up, a lot of times they'll stay in the more masculine interest and all of that stuff, but they would still eventually they, hey, I'm a woman, though they come to accept that they are a woman, and they accept who they are. But what's happening in today is that, oh, if you fit into these boxes, and that's what's happening, is this trans and non-binary ideologies. They are creating boxes and telling people that you need to be fitting into these types of boxes, which is why they tell you, hey, you're cis. And so, because they need to put you in a box. And so we have to have, there's a concern there, because we shouldn't be having and just enabling all of these kids to be running around growing up through the most challenging and difficult moments in really modern day, um, and then having the grand narrative say, you know what, and we need to support these kids in their identity. And to me, I feel like that ends up just becoming child abuse, because when you're taking a child who is confused, they don't understand what's going on, and then they're being fed from the outside world, and they're fed from their friends and this ideology that, hey, you're more masculine, therefore you are you're actually a man. Here, why don't you investigate and figure out, is this is what a man is? You know what? Oh, you're uncomfortable with your breasts, maybe you should get them removed, and that will make you feel more comfortable. These are very dangerous concepts for children to be playing with. And then when you have adults, and that, I think, is one of the important things, that you have adults who are coming in and they're saying, listen, yes, congratulations, and they want to celebrate. Oh, you're the opposites, you're the opposite gender. Congratulations, I'm so proud of you. And they get, and what I think is happening is they're getting this with what happened with gay people and lesbians, and who were, they were in the closet, and it was like, hey, look, you guys don't need to, like, congratulations, you guys, that was hard, because we were a country that was very anti that, and you could lose relationships, you could lose family for all those things. But when you're dealing with that in the trans kind of a situation, and you're promoting all of that kind of stuff, when gay people they come out, they're not having life changing consequences. They're having a lifestyle change. It's a lifestyle change. What's happening with trans people is they're having life changing consequences. They're getting their breasts removed. They're removing their genitals, or they're cutting off parts of their body in order to attach it to their genitals. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happens, and these are permanent, irreversible things. It makes it so that you are unable to have children, and as you grow up. And so what we do when we are enabling this kind of language, and just of affirmation, here's the positive affirmation for this, we're really just sending these people into a medical industry to basically become test subjects. And it's all just and the thing is all of these people, they think that they're doing the right thing. They think that they are morally good people because they are in support, because we've just kind of been led to believe that, hey, you know what, I'm a nice person. What do nice people do? They tell people they don't hurt people's feelings. That's what they do. But you know what bad friends do? Bad friends will encourage people in their bad habits, in their bad behaviors, because they don't care about how they develop. What a good friend will do is say, hey, you know what, you've got an issue here, you're fat. And that's where it's like, you know what, there's a lot of insults, and it's like, hey, if somebody's coming at you and they're telling you something that you don't like to hear, maybe there's something off, maybe there's something that you might want to do, maybe there's a change that you might need to do, maybe you need something, maybe you need a little kick in the butt. And that person, they're more likely to stick by you. They're there to help you with their criticism, even if it's insulting.
So I think in some ways we've changed the discussion, and now we're talking about the surgery that involves transgender. So for adults that undergo this, first of all, people that undergo these types of surgeries have very low levels of regret. And I got to give it to the
So
medical
far.
community and the psychological community that they screen these people as well as they do, because kids that undergo this surgery are less than 1% people who regret having done it. And I know the right wing trope is that it's 20%. It isn't. It's less than 1%. Now, I've done some stupid things in my life, but asking a doctor to cut off body parts is just not one of them. And so, as a male, somebody, if a doctor walks in with a scalpel, I'm telling him, even if my stuff's dead and never going to work, it came in with me, it's going out with me. I have no desire to let that scalpel anywhere near me. But there are some people that need that gone. I don't understand it. I don't need to. If they're happy and good with it after the fact and they feel like that's where the space they belong in, it's not my place to really get involved. And I understand I will say this, I will live my life and be grateful that with all the kids I've been involved with raising in my life, I never had to deal with a transgender issue with a kid as an adult, because I don't want to have to make that call. But know that when the psychologists and the doctors take you through the full process, chances are by a long shot they're right about doing the transgender.
Unfortunately, I would have
That
to
that that,
greatly
that
disagree. That
let
is
me
not the. Let me just get through this. I'll be quick. That is not actually how it has operated in a lot of ways. For a number of years, people were fast tracked, and you can go and you can talk to actual people who have now detransitioned, and they talk about. There's lots of them out there, but they don't get the soapbox and the speaker to really talk about it quite so much. You can look up Chloe Cole. She's someone who went through that whole process at a young age, and they were fast tracked right through it. And it was you can go in and, hey, you know what, you have these. Hey, I'm feeling like I'm a different gender, and they can run through a checklist, and then the kids will be fast tracked. I mean, they can have very few appointments, and then they go, okay, here you go, we'll give you the stuff, and they pitch it as though you can either have like a dead son or a new or a new daughter,
Right.
kind of a thing. And what ended up happening is that a lot of these psychologists, therapists, all these people in these industries, they were effectively threatened with losing their license, with losing their businesses, should they not adhere to this gender affirmation type of a policy.
Right.
And they were pushing these kids through in rapid succession to take puberty blockers, to get on HRT. A lot of them started and a lot of them stopped. And fortunately, there hasn't been a massive amount. But I guarantee you in 10, 15 years from now, because it's going to take a long time for these kids to grow up and realize what has happened to them, how this ideology has impacted their lives and the future that they could have potentially had. And there's going to be a lot of regret. I can promise you
so
that. And
so
how
we
many
can
and how many do you really want to risk? And I think that's one of the important things is when we're talking about these are kids who are malleable. They don't understand reality in the way that it all really is. And if what we're doing is we're saying, hey, you know what? There's at least there's a high percentage that are so far happy. Well, that low percentage ends up countrywide being a lot of kids. It's a lot of kids. And I'm not just comfortable saying, you know what, hey, you know what, it's 10,000 kids. 10,000 kids, that's a low percentage out of 350 million. 10,000 kids, that's not too many who end up with a regret. To me, that's a
we
lot.
I have a question
we
for the group.
we
So
have
what should occur if the father doesn't want to transition or start hormone replacement
Right.
therapy, but the mother does?
let me
go
I'll
through.
speak to that, but I also want to address some of what Jordan,
Oh.
Neil, and Neil
Yes.
brought up, which is there is quite a process to transition, and most people who go into that process are not put on drugs or do not undergo surgery. I mean that's most people socially transition, and they don't complete any other kind of transition until they're adults. Very few kids are transitioned, and it's done working with parents and doctors. And to talk about, well, I guarantee you in 10 to 15 years, that's very speculative. What we've seen so far is most people who transition do not regret it. Now, should
That
we
you know
maybe
of.
should we maybe
most
well
is-
this is
what does most mean?
I
Sorry.
didn't interrupt you, so please, thank you. So most data that we have, and we can say, well, the data's wrong because blah blah blah, but the data that we have shows that most people who transition have not so far regretted it. We can look at famous transitioners. Caitlyn Jenner is probably the most famous. The actor Elliot Page is another famous one that comes to mind. And years later, they have no regrets. Now they are adults, but we can go back and say there are kids who there are adults who wish they'd transitioned earlier, and they regret not having had the opportunity to do it, or not being able to do it. So that definitely cuts more than one way. No pun intended. And to say, well, it could be a mistake for some people, therefore let's not do it for anyone, I think goes too far. I think we can research it more and look at having stricter standards for who can transition, maybe having them get more counseling or what have you, and not if we want to say, well, you have to get somebody who's not in that group to review the case or something like that, I could go for that. But to say, well, we're not ever going to do this because it hasn't worked out for some people, I think disadvantages a whole lot of other people. And I'm not necessarily, I don't personally favor that. In terms of what you should do if one family member, if a father agrees and a mother disagrees, or vice versa, who has custody gets to decide, I think.
Well, what if
That's
they
how
both have custody?
I'm sorry?
What if
well,
they both have custody and they live in the home?
Usually, oh, I see. You're not talking about divorced parents. You're talking about mom and dad in the home. That's a tough one. I don't know the answer to that. That you can't cut the kid in half and say, well, dad gets to decide for the left half and mom for the right half. So I don't know how you would. I honestly don't know how you would work that out. I think in that situation, the parents have to work it out for themselves. Perhaps that's probably something. If one parent is strongly a proponent of the kid transitioning and the other is not, they're probably going to get separated or divorced over that, and it's going to get settled in court who has custody and who can make that decision. I think one thing that should not happen is you should not be able to, let's say, be in a state where it's stricter, and then you just take your kid and take them to another state where it's allowed more often, or vice versa. I think fleeing the state so that you can do what you want with your kid, or fleeing the country even, is not a good way for deciding these topics. And then another point that was brought up was agendas and pushing ideologies. We definitely have a Christian majority ideology that says trans identities are not valid. And I'm not saying anyone in this room believes that or doesn't, but the ideology swings much more towards enforcing strict traditional male and female norms. Our role models tend to be, you know, actors, movie stars, professional sports figures who are representing, a male gender primarily, and then we have actresses, beauty pageant winners, performers, etc., who are representing female identities. There's very few like really famous trans role models. Kids are not in school. They might, maybe there's a trans person in their school who's really popular and telling everybody to transition, but overall, like, most kids are not actually falling prey to this. I think the high that was reported in one instance was something like, in some places there are 16% of people who are changing their names, or of kids who are changing their names or changing their pronouns. And 16% sounds like a lot, but if you think that that's social contagion, then you have to question how many people in other areas where it's very low are suffering from pressure not to talk about how they really feel or who they really are, right? So and a lot of these studies, kids have questions about their identity. Most of them outgrow it and they become fine adults who aren't really bound up in these issues. If a kid wants to change their name or go by a different pronoun, or wear a dress to school, or when they're born male, that's probably not going to hurt them long term. I will assure you that most of those kids are going to end up just fine in 10 to 15 years. They may look back at it and laugh. Going back to Douglas Adams, it's just weird to us because we grew up with something different, and the change is hard. So I don't agree at all that there is an overriding trans agenda that is scoring these massive victories. If anything, the pressure now is in the opposite direction, where we're saying, okay, you can't have your gender on your driver's license or your passport. The pressure now is to suppress it, if anything. So it's going in the opposite direction. I know some people agree with that. I think it goes too far in the opposite direction right now. And then, and I think that ties back also to the question about parents is what is it that if you're a parent and you see doctors, therapists, what have you, and they suggest a particular course of action, you say, well, I don't agree with this. Go see another set of therapists, and see a reasonable set of therapists, not the everybody should be trans therapist if there is such a thing, or the no one should be trans therapist if there is such a thing. Find someone that's kind of in the middle that you try, that and see what that second set of people does. And I think if you're getting 2 or 3 sets of doctors, therapists, mental health professionals, etc., doing this, then advising you on one course of action, you should probably consider that if you disagree with them, there's a high likelihood you're wrong. And that could be either way. If they're telling you, Don, this kid shouldn't transition, and you think they should, you could be wrong. And if they're telling you this kid should transition and you say they shouldn't, you are probably wrong, because most of us don't know that many trans people. We don't know what it's like to be trans. The kids are telling us how they're feeling, and that's valid. And if we want to say, okay, you can have a different name and wear a dress, but I don't want you to do something until you're older. I get that, but you also have, again, there's a whole body of work and professionals and evidence that we can look at at what would be better for a kid, and that should all be taken into account. And I've never had to deal with it as a parent. I'm sure it's very difficult, and it's a great question. I hope most families that face it can come to an agreement. The other issue that I think comes into play here, and I think this is actually one of the big divides between the right and the left, is how much of this is not so much one person having biases or prejudices one way or the other, but how much of this is social bias, structural bias, prejudice, if you want, if that's not too strong a word, where our other suggested topic is homelessness. There's a lot more trans people who are homeless. This is for you, Jeremy, because you're talking about transitioning topics. There's a lot more trans people who are homeless than the general population. We were talking about rape earlier. The incidence of rape among trans people is higher than in the general population. This is a population that is victimized far more than it is a population that it forces their agenda on anybody. And when we start talking about them as trying to push an agenda that rather than having an agenda pushed on them and being looked down on by a large segment of society, I think we're making a mistake. And what we should be doing is, we don't have to say, okay, well, I'm just going to bend over backwards to all activism, but we should look at the fact that trans people are more likely to be victims and to face prejudice than other groups in society.
Okay. Thank you for that. Let's summarize. I'll assume that is your summary, and then let's next move on to Neil's summary with this topic. And I know Jordan wants to say something as well. No, Neil?
Just wanted to point out to Jordan that there are no guarantees in life. I watched one too many reruns of Rocky and decided to take up boxing as a hobby. And my grandson came to me the other day and said, "Oh, you think?" Because I've taught him just a little bit about boxing, but I don't want him actually boxing. And he asked me about it, and I told him, find something to do with yourself besides getting a hobby that invites other people to punch you in the face. And I say that half joking, but it's just true. And I got nobody to blame but myself for having taken up that hobby. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world back in the day. And now, I'm constantly worried about, CTE and brain damage and all these other things. So when you look at a world where I just had my knees replaced by the VA about 3 years ago, and the threat to my life was probably greater than the chance of somebody that undergoes these surgeries to transition to their lives and their happiness. Now, I came through. I always got to worry about infection. I got to worry about, the knees rejecting because of an infection. But at the end of the day, there are no guarantees. When you go in to get your tonsils out, you could die on the table. So, I understand it. It's sad. But at the end of the day, we have regrets based on decisions we make. And like you said, if there's 10,000, that's 10,000 too many, but it should not stop people who want to go down that road from going down it.
Well, I think people who want to go down that road need to make that decision as adults. And I don't think that adults should even make this decision for children for things that will affect those children later as adults. No one who is, I teach people up to 18 years old, and none of them has an entirely developed prefrontal cortex. None of them, when they come back to visit me 5 years later, has the same outlook on life and the same understanding of who they are that they had when they were 18 and when they're 25. They're just not the same. I don't think that it's healthy for a parent or a doctor or anyone without an extreme extenuating circumstance to make a life altering, physical, mutilating decision for a child. I just don't see that as necessary. I have no problem with adults deciding to transition, but I do not think it should happen to children under any circumstance.
Mutilating is a very loaded term, and I'll leave it
Well,
at that.
I mean, when your body parts are removed and there are scars for life.
Mutilated is a very loaded term, and
All right,
I'll leave it at that.
I think if I had my body parts removed, I would consider it mutilation.
Jordan?
Yeah. So
Well, I'm sorry, you were done, correct, Willow? I want to make sure that you, since we're summarizing our thoughts, I want to make sure you got everything you wanted to say.
Well, I mean, I do think if if you make the decision as an adult to change your body to alter it, I don't consider that mutilation. I think when it's done to someone, a lot of times with sick parents, I'm sorry, who are feeling like having a trans child makes them special, there's a problem with the parent, and the child has to. There's a consequence that the child will have to pay for the rest of his or her or their life. But I do think that if these decisions are made without the proper mental development, that it is not necessarily medically necessary or even cosmetically desirable. So I don't know. I know that mutilated seems like a loaded word, but I can't think of one that's more accurate.
I'm gonna not respond
Okay.
unless we have time later. I think we're also coming to the end of the debate.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think Jordan got us off to a good start. So I think it's
I
appropriate
get my
that
little summary, my final summary. I get to address a few little final finales
Yeah.
surrounding this kind of topic. You know, you kind of use this term most, and I feel like that was having a lot of you're putting a lot of weight on what most was doing. There was a lot of value in that. Well, most people are okay with this, and most in this, and most in that. It's like, but the majority is not the concern that I'm really dealing with. The concern that I have is with the minority. It's the minority of children who are being exposed to these concepts that they don't understand. They just simply don't understand. And if you're just going to kind of like enable them to say, hey, well, this is what there were most people who have transitioned. I mean, you kind of have this thing. Most people who have transitioned do not regret their transition, and they're adults now. And it's like, well, but that doesn't really fit too well with all of the other children who are going through this entire process, and they're being brought through this system, and they get on puberty blockers. They get put on HRT, and then they get off of it, and they end up with lifelong consequences just from that. They don't have to go in and get the surgeries. The surgeries is not that common. It's not super common. But what is common is the puberty blockers.
Yeah.
What is common is the HRT, and those things. Hey, guess what? You thought at the ripe young age of 12 that you're the opposite sex. So you start doing this stuff, and you're on this stuff for 2 years, and then you come out and you're like, you know what? I'm not. I'm not actually that. And then you come to find out, a decade later, oh, I can't have children anymore. That sucks. And I think that what happens a lot is you can think about like rape. And what women do, a lot of women don't talk about it. They don't report it. There's an embarrassment that's around it. And I have no clue. I don't know how many people probably regret all of this stuff, but there's probably so much embarrassment around it that they're just like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm just going to kind of sit there and accept it. I'm going to accept that this is what happened to me and this is what I did, and I'm just going to continue living my life quietly with that regret. Yeah. So there was some. I guess I just wanted to get that little piece off my chest. So, yeah, I can end my little trans statements there.
Okay. Now, would everybody like to go 30 minutes over and talk about homelessness? Or would you like to just continue? Neil? I'd like to be unanimous
Oh, yeah.
in our decision. Neil, you'd like to go 30 minutes over? And okay.
Yeah.
So
You'd
now
like-
may be
you'd
a
like
good
to-
time to discuss trans women in men's sports.
Sorry,
Or
are we,
no,
are
it would
we,
be trans
homeless?
women in women's sports.
are we going over to talk about homelessness or to talk about more trans?
I'm good with the trans stuff. I think
I-
we've spent a lot of
I'm-
time on it.
Yeah.
I think they're both really important issues. So
Either the whole thing is
Wherever
going to
the
be about
direction
trans,
goes, I will
or we can do, or now is a perfect opportunity to switch to homeless. I'm perfectly happy to move to homeless. I think we all just did our final summaries on what we thought about
And
stuff.
we're comfortable not discussing trans women in women's sports.
I think people can probably put 2 and 2 together on how we probably feel about a lot of that stuff.
We can that's also a whole other debate, right?
Yeah, we can do
Yeah.
another
Like,
debate on that.
like if we you know, I could say something to Jordan's last statement. He could say something to my
Yeah, it could go in
something, and
circles
then
forever.
Willow could go. We could go on for a long time. And I suspect we will have more discussions about this, perhaps on the as a debate topic. I do want to say I really enjoyed this debate. I thought everybody made great points. Neil, some of your statements really cracked me up.
Oh yeah, you're hilarious, Neil.
Yeah.
We're getting we're getting good rivalries
Yeah.
coming out of this
hobbies
now.
that don't
Working
involve
out.
getting punched in the face. That one.
I haven't boxed, which involves getting hit a lot more, but I've been doing martial arts for like 30 years. And so I feel for you. The first time a teenager kicks you in the head and you realize 5 years ago I could have reacted and stopped that, but now I just can't. It's quite eye-opening. But yeah.
All right. So for the first topic in homelessness, the question is homeless usually self-inflicted from poor choices, such as poor choices, drug abuse, etc.? Or
Can I start us out? Sort of
Sure.
starting out on the
Go ahead,
left,
take your reins.
since we started on the right last time. Not that I think there was a clear divide between left and right on the last topic, and I don't think there will be one here. But there's some interesting things about homelessness that I found researching this topic, and if anyone wants the citations, I'll when Jeremy posts the debate, I'll share the citations. Just make a comment there that you'd like them. But housing issue, homelessness tends to be more prevalent in places like San Francisco, which are more affluent, more liberal cities, and it has to do a lot with income inequality and housing supply. So it's not to say that no one makes a bad decision that leads them to becoming homeless, but there's like this idea that homeless people will go to a place like New York or San Francisco where they're more accepted, and that does happen. But most homeless people are actually homeless in the area they were living in previously. So it's not like someone becomes homeless in Peoria and goes to San Francisco or New York. They they were in that area and they became homeless and stayed in that area. So I think that it's not completely accurate to say homelessness is caused by someone making poor choices or becoming a drug addict, which is whether addiction is a choice or an illness or both is a whole other discussion. But it's not necessarily related to there's a lot of alcoholics who are not homeless, for example. But it relates to and this has to do with this goes back to some of the trans stuff, and I don't want to bring up all the trans stuff, but like trans people, LGBTQ people, they lose their support structure. People that descend into addiction lose their support structure. So where they might have previously lived with a relative, now they don't. I think and then where there's a lot of people with money and there's a lot of inequality, you tend to see more homelessness as well, and so that leads people who study this to think it has to do with the supply of housing. And in cities that have provided housing first policies by providing subsidized housing or free housing, not shelters, right? Because shelters are temporary, but an actual apartment or a home, often a group home or something like that, that tends to reduce homelessness. The famous case is Salt Lake City, which provided a housing first policy, and that reduced homelessness to a very large degree, including among veterans and other vulnerable populations. And I didn't have time to look into why veterans are more vulnerable to homelessness, but they tend to be, and I think that's something we should definitely be addressing. But I'm sure we'll get into that. And housing first policies that provide free housing or market rate housing seem to be the best way to address it, though you still need to provide support policies, because if you put someone in a home in a free home and they have substance abuse issues or they need work training and so on, you still have to provide that. Now, there is also a divide between temporary homelessness, which is most people, they're temporarily homeless. They're unemployed. Then when they get a job or they get taken in by a relative, they're able to find a job or something like that. And long-term homeless. And the long-term homeless is, I think, who we mostly see. And that's who's most visible. But they're actually a much smaller set of the population. And unfortunately, the hardest people to help, because they're the ones that have psychological disorders, mental disorders, addiction issues, and sometimes you become an addict because you're homeless. Because I guess if you're living on the streets, maybe you want to be drunk because it helps you deal with and accept the situation. So I think homelessness can certainly be driven by poor choices, but I think there's a lot of structural factors and social factors that make it far more likely to have a large homeless population. And that does tend to be more of an issue in liberal cities where there are a lot of wealthy people, like my city of San Francisco. And I wish I was one of the super wealthy people rather than someone who wonders if they could move back here ever if they sold their house. So that is my starting summary.
Well, I don't think I'm going to disagree with you as much on this as I did with the trans issues.
Yeah.
I do agree that housing first is probably really important, but I don't think that everybody is homeless because of bad choices. I really don't. I know people who have lost their jobs and just didn't have any way to pay rent. They had unfortunate circumstances, illnesses, things that happened that were beyond their control. I personally was I was not homeless per se, but I was in a shelter because of an abusive relationship. I had to go to a shelter for several weeks, and then I got on Section 8 housing with my children for 3 years. I think a safety net is really important. My problem is more with the people who make the safety net a lifestyle and who don't accept help for housing or help for training as a way to be independent, but rather as a way to not have to become independent. I don't know. I saw a lot of that when I was in the system, of people who used the system as a lifestyle.
That I think those people exist for sure. And I think if you're in the system for a short period of time, you're exposed to those people because they're there for a long period of time, right? I don't have a good answer as to what to do about that, because we can't. I mean, if you throw them out, they starve or they turn to crime, because they're not folks who are looking for honest work. I think and I hope that that's a fairly small share of the population, but that's
think,
really. But I didn't do resorch on that, so I don't
think
know.
more than we would like it to be. I don't think it's everybody. I don't.
Yeah.
Um,
And so I wanted to say also, I appreciate your sharing that story, Willow. That gives
Yeah.
a lot of that gives a really good perspective on it. And how
I mean-
people do like end up in those situations through no fault of their own, and then get out of it. And I'm glad you're in a good place
I will say
now.
that sometimes the system itself works to keep people in the system. That's something else I saw, and that troubles me a lot. In my situation, I was in college. I was in my 30s. I didn't go to college until my 30s. I had 3 children, and I needed a safety net. I really did, and I'm grateful for it. I don't think it should be taken away entirely. However, when I got to the year where I was the semester where I was supposed to student teach, that was going to consume 40 plus hours of time every week. But I was also required to work 20 hours to be able to maintain the housing and the food stamps and the this and the that. And I was told by the counselor who worked for the state that I should drop out of school because then I could keep my benefits. And I don't know how often stuff like that happens, but I'm not saying this secondhand. That happened to me. That I was told, you should really just work at McDonald's for 20 hours and we'll take care of the rest. You don't need to finish college. Fortunately, I did not listen to that counselor, and I found a way to do the work I had to do and finish my school. But I don't know how frequently people are told things like that, advised to stay in the system. It's just easier. And it is hard to break out. It's hard to get to that point where if I get this job, then am I going to be homeless before I can afford somewhere to move into,
And that goes back to something Jordan said earlier about people giving bad advice with good intentions. And even though I disagreed with that particular aspect of it, I think people do that a lot. Like I don't know what the motive for that counselor was, but I can see, and I'm speculating, right? I can see where he thought, well, Willow's just better off getting the benefits or the aid than going to college. I'm glad you didn't listen to him.
Yeah, this is my
you're-
26th year teaching.
Yeah,
So I'm glad I didn't also.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously haven't been in your classroom, but from my interactions with you, I have no doubt you're an excellent teacher and have been a very positive influence on the lives of your students. Not to mention teaching them stuff, which is important too. But yeah. Well, I don't know what I think you teach English, so
Yes.
yeah,
High
Sorry,
school.
maybe I shouldn't give personally identifying
That's
stuff,
okay.
but yeah, but yeah, and I mean, I think um, you know, it aside from the safety net, the way our the, it's a lot harder to stay connected. Like we don't. I think there's a social change where um, 50 years ago I would have just stayed at my if I well 50 years ago I was 10, but so let's say 40 years ago, when I was 20, if I'd ended up homeless, I would have just stayed at my third cousin's place for a while. And I don't think we tend to have those kinds of relationships with the big extended family as much anymore, which I think is also one reason you have that problem. And here I'm speculating. I don't have data on this, but I think in smaller rural communities, you do have more of those kinds of relationships where your family's been there for 100 years, and your third cousin was like the person you played with every day. So when you fall on hard times, he gives you a place to stay. Because whereas now, I mean, I happen to have good relationships with a lot of my third cousins, but I find that that's pretty atypical. And so I think that's why you have a lot more. There is certainly rural homelessness, and I don't want to minimize that, but you have a lot more highly visible urban homelessness, because they don't have a relative or a friend who'll take them in. And I get it. It's hard to. I've had people in my family, and I've had friends who have addiction issues, and we let a relative stay with us for a while, till he got into a live-in program. But now I have a 13-year-old, and I wouldn't do it with my 13-year-old in the house, right? When we did it, we were well, my wife and I were not married yet. We were living together, and we had somebody in one of my relatives living with us, until he could get into a treatment facility, and that was really hard because like I hid all the booze and he still found it and drank a bunch. And my future wife was not happy. You know, but you know, now I wouldn't even we wouldn't do it with our 13-year-old at home. And so these kinds of issues, I think, become more prevalent, in cities, because you tend not to have as many of those connections. I think that's a very stereotypical thing to say, but I think in this case it does happen to be correct. And I've talked a lot, so I'll shut up for a while and let other people have a say.
Gordon, or you want me to go?
Yeah, I was gonna say, okay, maybe I'll try to sneak in here. Okay, so you know, you guys kind of talked a lot, and you talked a lot in kind of a specific area, and I think that specific area, there's elements of it that I think that you guys are certainly correct on, you know, but when I think about homelessness, you know, I'm in the state of Washington, and it's not. I kind of view a lot of the homeless like there has to be a delineation, I think, just as with a lot of things. And the concern that I have is not necessarily like with just the homeless people, the people who are down on their luck. They've had hard times hit their lives, and they need a help. They need a helping hand to get them out. You know, they need a little bit of a support system. That safety net there, I think, is very, very valuable. But I think that there have been elements that have been inserted and put into play that are perpetuating homeless, and not just to help the actual like unneeded or the homeless who are not drug addicted, the people who are down on their luck. I think that they end up suffering not worse, but they are having the elements that enable and allow them to get out and to get the services that they want. So if they want to go to a shelter, the shelters can be dangerous because the shelters are covered with, it's littered with a bunch of drug addicts. It's littered with dangerous people who shouldn't necessarily be there. They should actually be, the drug addicts should be in rehabs. And I think that there should be mandatory rehabs. So in Washington State, and I don't know if what the situation is in all of the other states, but in Washington is maybe roughly 10 years ago or so, they implemented this clean needles kind of a thing, where what they were going to do was they were going to provide, and this is what they have been doing, they've been providing needles and foil to addicts because they saw, hey, you know what, we're these people are sharing needles, and that's increasing disease. And so, but then they were like, you know what, so we're gonna supply them with that. But alongside doing that, they were also feeding them. They said, hey, you know what, you can come here every day and you can come and you can get your food. So it's like, here's two things that are, you would think are pretty good. Hey, we don't want to reduce disease, and so we're going to provide needles, and we're going to give you food. And by the way, we're also going to work on building homes for you guys. So we're sitting here trying to create homes, build homes all over the place. And then they were like, you know what, jails, and there's been a lot of crime that's been going on, and we don't want to take addicts because they're addicts, and that sucks. They're living a hard life, and we don't want to throw them in jail. So what ends up happening is they just start being light on that. So now we have developed a system where you have a drug addict who is homeless, who is perpetually and forever able to wake up in the morning, do drugs, get food, do more drugs, go to sleep, wake up, do drugs, all in public. And so what ends up happening is you have all of these infested areas, and they're along the sidewalks. They say, hey, you know what, we're not gonna, it's cruel to kick people off. People are trying, they're just trying to survive. And it's like there's so much of this empathy that's being dumped into it. And I really believe that it's hyper toxic empathy. And it's creating these situations that perpetually enable these people to destroy their own lives. They are literally given no opportunity, no actual opportunity. Because if anybody knows anything about an addict, as soon as they wake up, their entire day, all that they want to think about is they want to go and they want to do drugs. And when we feed them, we house them, we provide them with needles, and we allow them to just do it on the streets, they're able to do that every single day. And who wants to go walk downtown with their family, with their children, and they see, hey, here's somebody who's hunched over. Here's a group of people who's hunched over. Daddy, what are they doing? What's that guy doing? Well, he's high on drugs. Do you want to tell your children that? Here's somebody who's lying on the ground, motionless, and you just wonder, are they dead? And what's happening is we're creating this system that is just enabling this stuff to happen. And when we're dealing with fentanyl, it rots people's limbs. There's going to be a lot of people who have lost their limbs. And what I'm not finding, what I don't hear, are actual solutions to this kind of stuff. Now I've got solutions. I come up with solutions, and I may as well kind of like soft pitch it to some degree. I think what we need to do is we need to create rehab centers, and we need to make it mandatory. If you are homeless and you are caught doing drugs, you go to rehab, and then we get to assess you. We get to figure out what's going on. If you are mentally ill and you are not fit for society, well, we need to build we need to build mental institutions, and then you'll go into a mental institution. And if you can't get out of the mental institution, then that's where you're going to be. You're going to live in the mental institution because you're not healthy. You're not mentally fit to live in the world. You would have no home. You're not capable of having a home. So we'll provide you a home in an institution. If you're an addict and you don't have any skills, but you're not mentally ill, we would develop a skill center, and here at this skill center we will teach you how to gain skills. You can be a plumber, you can be all kinds of stuff, and then you can go through the mandatory system of rehab, collect, gain your skills, and then take that skill out into the world, and you could do your best to make it there. And if you relapse and stuff like that, then you end up coming back, and you get rinsed and repeat through that cycle. There's also a lot of people out there who have they are severely disabled. They are addicts and they are disabled. And I saw one guy, and he was walking down the street. He was an addict, and he's 90 degrees walking with a thing. He can't lift up his head. He can't stand up. He cannot function. That guy has an expiration date that is very soon. And I think that, and I don't think that it's okay that we just let this guy, and he's an old man, just die on the streets. We should have care centers.
Let me interrupt there before you lose your thought, or we lose the subject. Who is going to fund that was a question that came to you.
Well, I can get to that.
Okay, thank you.
Let me finish. Let me get through
I'm sorry
all
to
this
interrupt.
stuff.
Okay, thank you.
So, I'm hearing some extra audio. It's clinking. I feel like it might be. Oh, it's you, Lewis. Something's happening. When I muted you, it went away. That's okay. It's gone now. So basically, like, you have all of this stuff that's like, to me, I feel like this is what the solution is. And to get to it, maybe there's some more, and I think I could elaborate, but now it's been, my train of thought has been derailed. But to the question of who's going to fund that, it's kind of our responsibility. We are the ones who created this problem. And who's gonna deal with it? Somebody has to deal with it, right? And actually, here's one of the things: is, Lewis, you said, a lot of the homeless, they're not, they didn't travel here from other places. I would significantly disagree with you. Maybe I would agree with you on the homeless that you guys were talking about, but the drug addict types, they're not tolerated in a lot of these other places. What they are is come in Washington State and Oregon and California, they're very much tolerated. In fact, we have these systems that I believe are scam systems that are developed, and they take taxpayer funds, and these are things that we created. We said, hey, here's a program, and we're going to fund this program to feed the homeless, to house the homeless. We're gonna enable all of this stuff to happen. These are the mayors are talking about making these things happen. And so instead of dumping all of our funds into these things, we could develop them into this. Here's a rehab center. How many rehab centers do we need? We need several. How many mental institutions do we need? We need several. How many skill centers do we need? We need several. How many care centers do we need? We need several. And you can even come up with other things where, like, when you have an addict and they just need to be busy, some addicts are like, I just can't. It reminds me of a Family Guy clip where it's Stewie, and he's grown up, and he's sitting there, and he's just pumping iron. He's just lifting weights, and all he's doing is he's talking about weights. And I think he's like, well, what if you didn't do weren't lifting weights? He's like, I do crack. Because they have to occupy themselves with something. So we could set up like a farm, or we can set up something else where people can basically continuously be active, and they can also be productive. So, and that can produce an income for the state that then, like, here's a bunch of fruits, and here's a bunch of vegetables that the government produces, sells to the people, and then takes back and gets reinvested into these programs. But I think that there's a lot of other states where these people, if you went around and you asked a lot of people, well, hey, where are you from originally? They're from all over the United States. They're everywhere, these addicts. And so what we can do is we can say, hey, look, maybe we can say, hey, different states, we've got X amount of people who are from your state, give us money. We could do that. Or we can say, hey, federal government, this is a big deal. This is a big thing. We need some support. We need some support from you guys. And then boom, we would have this, because this is not a state problem. This is not a local problem. It has become state problems because these are the locations where these people have existed, or where they have fled to, because they're enabled to continuously live this lifestyle. So I think that there's stuff that needs to happen. We need to do something about it. We need to actually take real legitimate steps and break the cycle, because if all we're going to do is say we're going to provide you needles, we're going to provide you food, we're going to provide you shelter, and we're going to allow you to do the drugs on the streets, they can just continuously do this and they're just going to die. All of these people are just going to die. And then you know what? It is morally and ethically horrendous. It is not an okay thing. I view it as torture. I think that this is torture, that what we're doing to these people, and we are enabling it. As long as we're saying you can have these needles, we're saying continuously drug yourself, continuously do this, and we're gonna actually support you and do this. These are bad friends, is what the way that our system is operating. We are the bad friend who is enabling the death and destruction of all of this entire population of people. And what's even worse is all of these people, they are profiting off of this. This is an industry. You have these people who run these organizations, they run these nonprofits, and they get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. They have staff, they have all of these things. People get paid for this stuff. Yeah, sure. You have these nice people who are going around, they're saying, I'm feeding the homeless. I'm doing something, I'm volunteering, and in those senses, if they're actually feeding the homeless, like you guys are talking about, I think there's some good in that. But in what we're actually doing and enabling, we're not helping these people. We are killing these people. And I think there needs to be a new perception and a new look into what is actually happening on the ground and what it is. And we can't, I'm just done. I'm done tolerating and accepting this. I'm good natured and I'm a good person because I'm taking care of the symptom for these people. We can't deal with the symptoms of these problems, because all that's going to do is perpetuate it. Instead, we actually need to target the heart of it. What is causing it? And it's really what ends up causing it. It's a little bit of it's maybe a bad moment or a bad time, or somebody gets brought into some drugs and they fall off the wagon, and then we just keep them on that wagon, and it destroys their lives. And we have to change our perception about that. So that's my piece.
I don't think what you said is entirely disconnected from my situation. It was this whole enabling people that I was trying to get around to, but you connected it to the more broad, I think, problem that is in cities with the homeless there. But it is enabling, and I don't think enabling is the right answer. And I do think a lot of funding goes into enabling that could be used for these rehabilitation centers and these training centers that you suggest. That that's what I've always believed would be a better situation than just perpetuating homelessness, but feeding people and enabling their homelessness. That's all. I'm going to be short-winded.
I'm going to actually say I don't disagree with most of what you said. I didn't look up like what specific groups of homeless people suffering from what specific problems are from the area or somewhere else. So I don't know that these people aren't coming from all over the place. I live in San Francisco, which, as I mentioned at the beginning of the debate, is one of the places where there's a lot of homelessness. Our former mayor and now our governor, Gavin Newsom, he wants to institutionalize homeless people who he thinks can't take care of themselves. And it's a big debate in the state. I think that you should do it for some people, but not. I know Gavin Newsom's a whole is a loaded.
If I can just mention, I'm just kind of chuckling because he's the one who created the problem,
Well,
and now he's actually and he's like, oh, now this is what the solution is. So I just find it humorous.
Well, I mean, I'll leave the debate about who created the problem for another time. It existed long before Gavin Newsom. His thing was he wanted to, when he was in San Francisco, he wanted to provide care, not cash. Like, we're not going to give these homeless people money, which is what was being done before, thinking that they'll go find a place to live.
He's going to enable them instead.
He wanted to provide them with homes and services like healthcare and mental health and so on, which was intended to get them out of the situation they were in. It didn't work nearly as well as he hoped. And so we keep trying all these policies, and the policy that works is putting them in housing,
mandatory.
Right. Institutionalizing them, right. That there's some unfortunate history behind involuntary institutionalization of people. So we have to be careful to put in safeguards and to make sure that if we say, okay, basically we're saying that you're mentally incompetent and cannot take care of yourself, so we're putting you in a program that we're able to evaluate people on a regular basis to see if they can get out of that program, and the push should be to get them out of that program, although some people will need to be there indefinitely, if not for the rest of their lives, unfortunately. But and then one thing, you addressed the funding, and I agree, it should be national. So I'm saying, like I said, I agree with you to a large extent. And people who thought that we should be doing other things are now changing their minds, in large part, not everybody, because we're seeing that I once thought, well, if we just give people money, of course they'll go find a place to live, but that's not what happens. If you're a drug addict, you take that money and you spend it on drugs, right? If we feed people and we give them clean needles, they won't get sick, and then they'll get treatment somewhere along the line. No, they don't want treatment. If they're going to get treatment, it's because we force them to get treatment. But that's a big expansion of state power. And I don't think that you disagree with this. And I expect that you also think that there should be safeguards to how we do it. But for the most part, I think yes, we have broad agreement that there is a group of homeless people that needs very direct state intervention. And I think along with you, we should fund it because we have the moral responsibility to fund it. And it's good for our economy in the long term. Speaking of San Francisco, it's hurt our tourists.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Louis. I just want to make sure you can continue on wrapping that up, but let's please give Neil a chance to say his thing.
I have like 30 more seconds.
You're on round 3 there, buddy.
I was going to say. Well, I also been advocating that we all have time limits, but that's a separate discussion. The whole thing with it is we need. I am very aware that there's a cost to doing all these things, but there's also a cost to not doing them. The economies of these areas are hurt. You have less tourism. Housing prices are lower. People don't want to work in those areas. There's danger to working in those areas sometimes. So there's a lot of economic benefit to addressing this, doing some of the things that Jordan advocated. Maybe all of the things. I didn't take note on every detail, but the forced intervention, I think, is key to some people, for some population of the homeless. And Neil, I think that turns it over to you.
Okay, as much as I want to engage Jordan's bringing up the drug issue because it's warranted, we would have to spend so much time talking about the drug issue to get back into homelessness. So I think that's a discussion on its own for another time, but it definitely needs to be discussed. What I have to say is you often hear people say, I don't want to pay for that, when the truth is you're already paying for it. You are paying more money out of your taxpayer dollars to have homelessness than it costs to end it. You are paying more money to have a healthcare system that has lots of people uninsured and a lot more people underinsured. And you're paying twice as much to have that happen. And so when we're dealing with this, we got to understand this. Now, I have relatives and some friends, because not all my friends are liberal, that have made their business to keep new housing from being built. And it's a not in my backyard mentality. And the reason is they own multiple properties. Even if you only own one house, that house gains more value faster by preventing other houses from being built. So we're going to have to address that. And one of the things I think we need to do is all that land that used to be our manufacturing base that abandoned us to go to communist countries, we need to take that and we need to build housing on it and let the government become a landlord. I'm sure that's not going to set well with right-wing people, but at the end of the day, that's how we got to get people off the streets. We don't have to have people off the streets, and never, ever should we have families on the streets. And like I said, the drug and the alcohol issue is a different animal altogether. But we have a major problem with homelessness. We're spending more than we have to have homelessness, and we need to end that. If you take 100 people that have health insurance and are just average citizens, and then you take an equal amount of homeless people, you're going to find that you're paying 1,000 times more for their health care than you're paying for your own, because most of them are completely uninsured. And there's a lot of things that need to be done to make this go away, but we can do it. And I don't think I need to get much further into it than that. If anybody's got questions, I'll field them.
Well, that sort of naturally segues into our question that I believe Jordan also touched on, is that would taxpayer funding housing lower crime enough to offset costs associated with taxpayer funded housing for the homeless?
Well, I would imagine that like if you created a system where you removed like all of the problem people, basically you said, oh, if you're doing crime, like here's addicts who are committing crimes and they go into and maybe they're low level crimes and then they go into rehab, and then we can figure out, okay, you're doing these crimes because you're stealing stuff because you want to, you're trying to get more drugs and stuff like that. But once you're sober and you have some skills and you can get a job, you don't steal anymore. But if you're like a repeat offender, you would just end up going back into jail, which is really where you would belong. And maybe what it is, because one of the things that I'm kind of tired of hearing is like, well, but the jails are full, the prisons are full. Build more. If we have more criminals, then we need to jail and in prison more criminals. Because what would you rather have? Would you rather have somebody running around for their 72nd arrest for some violent crime, and then finally eventually they go and kill somebody, or they're mentally ill and our asylums are our mental institutions are full, we got to just let them out, and then they go and they push people in front of trains. Like, or they stab some woman in the neck. Like, these are the kinds of consequences that we end up having. And so I think that if what we did is we said, look, we need to build these institutions and we need to locate the people who need to be in these institutions, right? I mean, I bet you none of you guys would find yourself in an institution, right? You guys aren't running around, you're not doing drugs, you're not attacking people, you're not doing anything, you wouldn't find yourself in any of these situations. You guys aren't really the problem. But there's a lot of people out there who, if given the opportunity, would terrorize you. They would push you in front of a train, right? And you need to prevent those people from being in public. And because all of those people, those people, they absorb police resources, they absorb taxpayer funds because we're feeding them. A lot of them we're feeding, right? And it's like, look, here's kind of how I kind of see it, right? If what we're doing right now is we're providing them needles, we're providing them their food, and we're providing them their shelter, why not just create an institution where we can save a little bit of money on needles, and we provide them with food, and we provide them with housing? It's located in an institution where they fit. So it's like, are we going to be saving money? Yeah, we're going to be saving money, because we're not also going to have to go out and arrest them or deal with the police phone calls of, hey, this person's causing a ruckus, this person's attacking people, hey, this person's where they shouldn't be, they're digging through my garbage, and I'm on 37th Street and Westbrook or whatever, and it's like, hey, this is just a neighborhood of folks who just live here. I mean, my mom lives in just general housing, and it's like there's homeless people that are just coming through and digging in the garbage cans back. There's houses that are for sale where they're not quite under active construction at the moment, and they're coming up, and they're trying to kind of basically break into the house or make their way, and they're trying to in effect steal the property. My mom has to call the police and say, hey, you got to get out here and tell these people to knock it off. These are resources, and that's just like my general experience of what I'm aware of, right, within my life. And that stuff is all over the place. So if we actually took the time and we got the funding to build these places, and we put the people who need to be there in those locations, I think we're going to end up saving a lot of money, and a lot of people are going to be happier. And we're going to stop the perpetual, because we're going to prevent people, because if you can catch somebody before they hit absolute rock bottom and you throw them into rehab, it's like, hey man, I just became homeless because I'm a drug addict, and they get picked up on the street and they get brought into a rehab center immediately. Their chances of getting out and being an actual productive member of society once again is probably very, very high. Very, very high comparatively to what it is today. So I really don't see any reason why it would be a financial burden for us to create this system. Now, just the final thing is, what we don't have, though, is we don't have any representatives. We don't have anybody who has actual power, or even that I'm aware of, that is attempting to implement these kinds of ideas. I really think that we need to find people. We need to understand who is out there. Maybe somebody's gonna see this and say, hey, you know what? I want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy, but I would absolutely support and do what I could to help somebody like that get elected, so that they can actually implement these things. Because I'm absolutely sick and tired of walking around and just seeing my state actively poisoning and destroying people's lives.
Agree wholeheartedly with what you said, especially about the cost effectiveness of rehabilitating people before they have completely hit rock bottom. It's a lot harder to I've had addicts in my family. It is a lot harder to break an addiction and to get treatment if it is prolonged addiction, and especially if that addiction has been supported by the state. It's very difficult. If it's early in the problem, then yeah, I think people can be rehabilitated. They can get productive jobs and they can contribute to society. And so, in the long run, even though it may be more expensive up front to build these kinds of institutions and these kinds of rehabilitation centers and training centers, in the long run, it would be cost saving.
Want to go, Neil? I have things to say, but I've talked a lot on this topic.
Getting into a new reality, and that reality revolves around AI. And you are walking into a society where everything will be monitored. You're walking into a society where, whether you like it or not, most of us will be on welfare. I don't see any way to stop this. And within 5 years, you're going to know this for a fact, or you're going to realize I was 10 years off. But I think by 2032, you're going to see the writing on the wall. And these petty criminals that run around, and maybe the guys that aren't so petty criminal, their chances of getting away with anything in that society are slim to none. When you build a housing project, there's nothing that's going to go on in that project that's not going to be identified. So when we look at criminality, we should be heading down the path of letting people out of prison because the majority of the people that are there, and let me say this, America imprisons more people than any other nation on earth. We imprison more people per capita than any other nation on earth. Is it because Americans are bad? Well, there's a law professor at Harvard that wrote a book that's called 3 Felonies a Day. And what he says is that the laws have become so aggressive and so convoluted that we created laws that allow them to arrest you, convict you, and put you in prison if you become a problem. You will be targeted. So there's a lot of balance that needs to happen here. But the homeless, the idea and the basic fundamental foundation of this whole discussion is that we're already spending more money than we should to get rid of homelessness. And we're spending it to have it. And we just need to reverse that. And if we ever have a discussion about the drug issue, Jordan, I'd invite you to look at the second era of what Switzerland did to end their drug problem or lower it drastically. And it's a combination of what you're talking about, only they didn't imprison people or intern people to get there. But they basically got drugs off the streets of Switzerland. And you're going to find that a lot of your Washington types are going to be opposed to it.
I actually jotted down to look up the Switzerland program. Yeah. I know Gavin Newsom's controversial, but this was his plan. It's the only reason I mentioned him. One thing he wanted to create in California is something called a care court. And it was the idea that you would have a court where, let's say, I think someone is incapable of taking care of themselves and they're going to end up on the streets or are on the streets. I can make a referral to care court. A cop can make a referral to care court. There's a number of people that can make a referral, and they're evaluated to see if they should be institutionalized in programs similar to what we're talking about. And again, the goal is not to keep them in an institution for a long time. It's along the lines of what Jordan was proposing, which is you want to treat them. Now, some of them, again, probably won't ever recover, but most people, again, to Jordan's point, I think would end up coming back to being productive members of society. And that puts us at the ending in 6 minutes. I think that Jeremy was talking about or close to it. So I'll let that be my final thought. Is there time for anyone else to say anything?
I think that it's interesting that we all kind of mostly agree on this, and yet there's such a disparity politically, and I agree with you, Jordan. We need to find some representatives who are willing to take the steps that need to be taken. Nobody's willing to do that, and I think it's a lot of it is because they're just too much dug in to their side of the aisle, so they're more willing to. They would rather fight each other than work towards a solution.
And these are partisan solutions. I think this is to me is just a common sense solution.
Exactly.
I honestly, I grew up as a Democrat, and I consider myself a '90s Democrat. And unfortunately, you know, we're kind of we've since 2016 basically. The 90s Democrat has just been thrown out the window, and the Democrats, to me, have just completely lost the plot. They've been funding and enabling all of this kind of stuff. They're not really helping. They're just in opposition of things, and then they have this sense of moral superiority, and they think that if I'm doing something that is helpful, you know, they're sitting there cutting down the trees, not that are directly in front of them, not understanding, and they continuously do so, not understanding that they're cutting down the entire forest. And I think that's one of the real problems. Just a final little note is with Neil. I think that with Switzerland, I think they did a pretty good job of actually getting drugs off of the streets. And I think that that's one of the big problems that our country has, is that we have just enabled, or not, I don't know how much we've enabled. Maybe we have, maybe we haven't, but a lot of drugs are continuously just getting into our place. And so I kind of have taken that into consideration. And that's kind of why I'm much more stringent on this mandatory kind of a situation, rather than just kind of like allowing people to just do maybe way off in the future, once, you know, all these numbers get reduced and people have actually gotten help. We wouldn't need to do that so much, the mandatory. But I think the mandatory is the solution. So that's my piece. Thank you, guys.
I
Was to
believe
create
Neil
this
is
park.
needed.
Okay, go ahead.
To say the changing Democratic Party is a whole other
It's another
debate. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
can
I'm going to leave it at that, because I know that's like another 2-hour discussion. Go ahead, Neil.
All right, so all I wanted to say is the liberals in Switzerland, their first move was to create a park where anybody that wanted to do drugs could go, and it became like a zombie wasteland. People ODing, there were dead bodies everywhere. Then they came up with a second plan, and the conservatives initially fought it, and it was so successful that everybody signed on to it. In America, our politicians, both Democratic and Republican, have opposed this for, I think it's since the 90s. And that's what we need to look at. It's a way of getting drugs off the street and getting drugs users off the street without necessarily interning them into some kind of mental institution. It's very fascinating. And I'll leave it at that because I know we got to go.
All right, let's close it out.
All right. Well, this was great. I had a great time. Thank you, everybody.
I did
All right,
too.
thank you very
Thank
much,
you. Thank you,
everybody.
Joe.
Put some faces
Yeah.
with some names.
Yeah.
Joe was frozen or something. He just
Yeah.
did his little.
Yeah.
All right, Joe, you're the mod. You got to close this out.
All right. Yeah. I guess you didn't hear. Thank you very much for participating, everybody. I look forward to future debates, and have a great day.
Yeah. Thanks.
You too.
All right.